Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Data Center Exchange. I'm Connolly, and today I'm recording, I think, at the earliest time ever to ensure I get the chance to speak to our next guest. Now, he gets around the globe, to say the least. I think he did over 100 flights last year, but he does base himself in Australia, so it's pretty late where he is right now. And I wanted this person on the podcast because this is a platform to shine a light on the industry and to elevate and educate in some way possible, big or small. And I believe my next guest can do that in terms of not just his professional experience and know-how, because he's vice president of global data centers at Megaport, but also his enthusiasm and passion for the industry is just infectious. And I'm sure you'll feel and see that today. And if the industry is going to grow and achieve its growth goals, we're going to need to shine a light on the industry. We're going to need that passion. We're going to need that enthusiasm to spread the message and to educate people out there. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Adam Gibson to the Data Center Exchange. Adam, thanks for joining us so late in Oz.
Thanks, Del. And as I say, the internet and the DCs don't sleep, so sometimes neither do you. And it's full swing in this podcast for sure.
No, absolutely. Now, as I said, you've got one of the before we started recording this, we had a chat about how you got into the industry. And I always want to bring that into at the early stage of the episode, because the industry draws people from so many different backgrounds and it inspires so many people in different ways at certain stages of their career. But that's where I always start. Where did your journey in the data center industry start? Because it's quite fascinating.
Look, it's been spoken about before in different parts of my 15 plus year part of the DC world and DC life. To short and sweet is I'm a gamer. I don't game as much as I'd love to these days, but that's how I sort of got into it. I was hosting gaming events all throughout Queensland, and one of the guys that was coming regularly was one of the, I guess we'll call it the CTO, COO of a small little server farm, DC it was then. And he said, who's doing the server, who's doing the network, who sort of builds this solution together, and this little group of us gaming every couple of weeks. I said, that's me. And he's like, what's your training? I'm like, it's all just through uni and doing Cisco courses and things like that. And he said, well, let's hang out. And within 48 hours of doing that, I went to his DC and had a look around and understood, what I'm sort of doing is a very simple scale, and they're doing it on a commercial scale. For a small business, it was quite profitable and definitely an enjoyable piece. Fast forward about 3 months, they had a conversation with another directors, and lo and behold, I got a text message saying, can you come in for a quick chat? I then started that afternoon as a night technician installing Server 2003 and even Linux like CentOS 4, Debian, things like that, and going, what is Yum and apt-get, and how do I do all this kind of stuff? And that's where it's grown. So, learning from as a network engineer and a system admin, the world has changed. Funnily enough, DCs have evolved definitely, and same as server infrastructure. But it's always good to sort of understand where the grassroots are of what we do every day is where it's come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And just casting your mind back to that sort of period when you were running your gaming events, you're obviously at that age, relative to your age, I'm assuming quite technically advanced if you're doing that. I'm sure there's not many people out there doing that. Did you know too much about what a data center was back then?
No, it was funny that gaming was sort of very, I won't say new, but because the internet, especially in Australia, wasn't advanced, it wasn't like, Europe or, in particular London, where you could get a BT connection with your TV sets, and obviously there's T1 to T3 connection to the US. It was very still cable and very slow compared to what we have now. So people were used to coming together and gaming together. And that was sort of a fun part, is games were built differently back then. We were all coming together, 64 players on a server and multiple servers. And that was sort of an enjoyable piece. So learning that componentry and understanding has grown to a point where I go, yeah, okay, it was fun, and now it's definitely changed drastically. Yeah. So that's sort of a different world altogether, and it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. How's your career like you say, you started almost the grassroots and, relatively compared to a lot of people out there, very young in terms of your entry into the industry, which is great to hear. But how's your career developed in the journey to where you are today, Adam?
Yeah, so obviously you said, there's a different technical piece to where I am. So I wouldn't say I'm technically gifted or smart in anywhere on the spectrum in that regards. I think I just have found an exciting part to it, and I think that's a key point that I don't get out of bed upset that I got to go to work today or that I got to call at midnight, something like that. I'm excited and happy to do so. It's just I enjoy what I do. I would love to tour another couple of thousand DCs in my life. And look, I'm early 30s, so there's still another 30 years left before I have to retire or legally can get some sort of government superannuation component. So there's going to be a few more years left in me, and using that excitement of early on technically building a network and building server farms to now looking at a bigger business where there are groups of people, whether it be investment funds or guys who've got some sort of financial background or have grouped a couple of DCs together. And we're seeing that more and more now where they go, we started with one, it's profitable, or we've been acquired by someone, now we've got 3, 4, 5, how they come together and what they can do. And using that sort of ability where you go, connectivity is king, space and cooling that's the norm. What is different to you and what's your differentiator? And that's sort of the world in which I've seen that grow. And that's the fun part for me is, technically there's a spot that I feel that I can understand and talk to them on a level, but then there's operational part and there's a commercial part, and it all comes in together quite nicely now.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And one of the reasons I asked you on this, or one of the things that triggered me to ask you onto this show, and what I was talking about at the start of the introduction, was your enthusiasm and your passion. I remember you posting late last year at some point, and you posted a few times, I think, that you got kind of, I think I sent you a message saying data center nerd required, which you self-proclaimed yourself to be one. I wasn't being offensive. I wasn't trying to be offensive. But you've got 1,000 data centers you want to visit across the world, I'm guessing. Where did that all start? And talk to me about that.
So, yes, I am, I guess, a DC nerd. The people use, you're clearly skilled in that area. And I don't know if skilled is the right word. And I just go, look, I love what I do. And the DCs are my world. So I feel like the whole point was I've owned my own DCs over the years. I've been a part of in different positions, looking after them as they're my own. So I can appreciate the time and the effort it goes into whether you do a 10 rack site or a 10,000 rack site, anything from 1 level to 50 levels. So what I grew from there of, I want to see what other people do. And that is whether I go to Norway, and spend time in Oslo and how they deal with snow. I know the guys up there, and that's a conversation we've had, through to go to Dubai and how do you deal with the crazy heat? It's dry, but there's not enough water for your cooling systems, and that sort of grew out to people love cars and people love doing other hobbies. As you get older, you've got a more of an expensive taste. Mine is now, how can I travel around the world and tour some of these sites that are unusual? That's in bunkers. I know some guys that I'm talking to now that have built some sites in caves and underground. Like that's, there's reasons for it, both operationally and technically, which obviously gives them an upper, and an edge on other people. But I sort of go, that's different, that's cool, and that sort of excites me because it's not just a normal, a car's got 4 wheels and a roof or maybe convertible. It doesn't, but it still has a functionality that you can't really beat unless you spend crazy money and you buy super sports cars or things like that. And everyone has their preference, right? I'm just a weird collector that I'm in a niche market and a niche industry, and I want to spend time in DC. So yes, I love them to a point where I've slept in DCs to support when there's been disasters. When there was flooding in Australia, in Queensland in particular, 2011. I've slept in a DC for 3 or 4 days, just because they're a foundation. I think that's something that we've spoken about is, look at the last 10, 15 years in particular, T1 connections, ISDN, dial-up, cable, those words were around. Now it's fiber, it's in Australia, it's NBN. It's a whole bunch of ways of which the technology has grown, and it's a part of every day. You don't go into a house and go, I need a phone connection to ring my mum and dad, or to make sure that I can contact people because I've got a mobile phone or a cellular device. It's now, do I have internet? And that's up there with power and water, and that's something that's grown from that piece. And now you look at carrier hotels and other facilities and micro nodes or edge DCs or other buzzwords that go around. Essentially is bringing the internet closer to the that eyes on glass metric that people use for when they're deploying sites. And that's, you're in the right industry when you know that it's not going backwards, it's actually going forward, but it's going forward at a rapid rate, and that's exciting. You don't understand the level of DCs and how important they are until you actually see either the customers that are in there or the way in which they support. And funny enough, now it used to be major sites, like it used to be Tokyo, Singapore, Sydney, London were all key sites, tier one markets. And that's where Global Switch and others went, 15, 20 years ago. That's where they deployed. Now you're getting sites in Boise, Idaho, in a really north place of Norway, in Stavanger and places like that. And you go, why is that? Because there's people residing there, because, there's a need for it, because people are using the internet in a way they've never done before. And that's the fun part is, the growth that the market has done, it's trending upwards. And, that adds a level of difference in the industry. Yes, there's a financial component. Yes, there's an energy consumption component. Yes, there's a skills shortage or a skills area that's in regions that don't have it. There's all these conversations that to go on in many podcasts, like yourself, Dale, and obviously what we do for our day-to-day jobs is there's different conversations that come out of this of, hey, DCs, therefore you're going to know this. Well, no, that's not the case anymore, because it's such a big industry, even though it's a very, very small industry too. It's a weird world that we live in.
It is. But that what you were saying there, I think or part of what you were saying there, a lot of the industry gets a lot of criticism for energy consumption, for use of resources, water, for example. You see a huge amount of at the moment. And I think that gets pushed through the media as such, in various different articles and reports, and rightly so. You need to shine a light on that. It is an important aspect. But then in the same breath, do you think the average person, and I was before, and I still am in a lot of ways, don't know a lot about the industry technically, but I work within it, but certainly I never used to. And you kind of don't know what data centers do on the other side and how they really have impacted everyday life. Just listening to this podcast, for example, if you are doing so, is facilitated from a data center, and everything that we do almost in the home and at work. But I don't think the balance is quite right.
No, and it's been one of those things that DCs, and there are certain sites that we know that are hidden, and they are government, or military, and that's fine. They can be like that for particular secrecy and that kind of level. But even some providers that are public also go, oh, we got a DC, but we're not going to give you the address, and this is how it is. That's just the way they've been for a very long time. It used to be nondescript buildings. And over time, marketing's a powerful machine. You love and hate marketing because sometimes you want to make it just simple, but yet they make it sexy, and it creates a cost, but also creates a revenue that you didn't expect either. And that's a part of what DCs have done. You look at Switch out of the US. You look at even Global Switch. I've mentioned them just before, but they've now turned themselves around in different ways to make them look like a bit more powerful. Next DC, they're a public listed company. Equinix, same thing. These companies have created a very, very profitable business, but had to do it in a different way. And marketing is a powerful tool for them. So you look at their sites, and they're not eyesores. They're not just grey buildings. They've got aesthetically pleasing components, due to government regulations or council regulations and things like that. And you have to have some greenery. You can't just have barbed wire fencing and stuff like that. And that's what the other part of we've seen is that the traction of that is they're standing out a little bit more now. And funny enough, I've been on random car trips with friends and whatever. I go, I bet you that's a DC. And lo and behold, we look it up and it is a DC. Some of them will remain like that. The guys at Iron Mountain in certain parts, I've seen that they go, it's just, that's how they do it. It works. It ticks a box. They've got their logo, but it's a standard, we'll call it commercial building. That's fine, and that works for them. Others go, we're going to paint it red, black, green, pink, whatever it is, and it's going to stand out. It's going to create a difference. And again, that's the part of the marketing, and that's the appeal to some, that they go, I'm happy to be in that. And obviously that creates the traction and the awareness that some people go, oh, this is a different market. And the construction people love it. The real estate people love it. The investment angle of it is, if there wasn't a finance team looking at DCs 10, 15 years ago, they probably wouldn't accelerate as quick as they have, because now there's been a massive investment component where a whole bunch of banks or other trusts have gone, hey, we're going to turn this into a conglomerate and look at digital realty. Basically they started out as a real estate investment trust, where they're going, we'll buy all this land and we'll put some stuff on it and then we'll lease it to other people. DOT have massive amount of buildings they own that sometimes don't even operate because it's done by someone else. And that's why CBRE and JLL and others have come into this mix, because they go, we can turn this building into a carrier hotel, in Denver or, Alabama or Oklahoma or wherever it is. They go, that makes sense to do so because there's not in a connection point. And it gets back to the original conversation we had, of interconnection, connectivity, that eyes on glass, getting the internet. They need to build it from somewhere. And this is the whole part of the journey that gets me excited, because DCs are evolving. Yes, there's still a very large building and there are hyperscalers, they're the Vantage, the Air Trunks of the world. They'll always dominate, and there'll be some big players that we use every day, Office 365 and Gmail and all that kind of bits and pieces that need large amount of space and have their own teams. But then there's the others that go, I need, they're an insurance company, they're an automotive company, and they're a, some sort of medical, group that go, hey, we need to keep this data secure, but how do we do that not in our own sites? And that's sort of where they go, we need to be local, and that's machine learning and the AI, which is a massive buzzword. Crypto was a big thing, and there was a whole bunch of DCs building crypto miners. Now it's converted to AI. Sometimes you sort of go, I'm building a facility that's going to be dead in 2 years because the phase is going to, that fad is going to change, and the phase is, it's recycled to something else. I think that's the other part of the business, is it's exciting in that regards, and I won't change that.
Yeah, and gaming's contributed so much to it as well, hasn't it?
Massively. And I think that's when you look at and it was an example I spoke about in a speaking role I did probably like 2015, 16, where Pokemon Go was a massive hype, and there are still a lot of people playing that on their phones and things like that. But when that took the world by storm, the amount of capacity and bandwidth was phenomenal. You look at, imagine, I know that you've got some younger kids too, Dale, where they're playing I can't think. Fortnite is the word I was thinking of. Fortnite's a massive thing. All even younger kids are now using YouTube as a way to, educate and things like that. So how do you get that connectivity closer, and therefore it gets to latency and again, building little modular places where if you've got a block of 100,000 people in that area, bring a node closer to them. That's the ability we have now, because we have capital. We have the smarts. We have the ability to support, and again, it's a utility now. People rely on it heavily, working from home, and COVID was an example for a good reason for the network side of things, where they just couldn't catch up. They were that overloaded with work because everyone's going, I'll jump on Zoom. It's great to see you, and I saw you at PTC, and that was great to shake your hand and convene in that way, but I can't hang out with you in Europe every other day. How do we work? And now the joys of the bandwidth enough around, so we can actually video conference, not send emails and stuff like that, and actually get the job done. But now it means that Zoom needs to upgrade their infrastructure. Everyone's now joining Zoom, and same with Teams and all the other video conferencing, Cisco WebEx and stuff like that. They're leveraging their application stack and their network stack to complement their hardware stack. Again, all resides in a DC.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to the gaming aspect, there's nothing like kids to remind you how important latency is and connectivity when Fortnite won't load or won't. There's lags and all sorts of problems. Yeah, they lose it.
Absolutely, and it's like that with every game too. There's going to be a new patch, and the amount of games being pumped out every year. The gaming industry is a very exciting one. I've got guys that I've worked with over the years have developing games, every year, and they're a part of Call of Duty or EA and stuff like that, and they're rolling games out every year, and it's just the roller coaster cycle where the game gets trendy. It sends a lot of data around the world to play on computers or phones or whatever, and then at some point it'll slow down and it'll go from the million, gamers a night to 500,000 to a couple of 100,000, and just plods away at a couple of 100,000.
Yeah.
But as we know, the population's growing, and the amount of teenagers that are coming into this space, or even preteen, the 8, 9, 10-year-olds that are got the ability to, we're fortunate enough that most of the world can have some sort of computer that plays some sort of game. So even if it's a two-dimensional game or a web-based game, they're still gaming in that way. They still need to connect to something. They're also now experiencing what lag is, and that's something that, my kids are going, well, why doesn't this load now? It's like, we don't have internet in the car. Well, why don't we have internet in the car? We've got internet at home. And that's, a part of the joys of what we do now as adults is going, well, didn't exist in our time. It didn't exist in your time. And that's just, it's going to get, unfortunately, it's going to get worse. If that's good or bad, I'm not sure. But that's just, again, gaming is a part of, everyday life, and YouTube watching and Vimeo watching and all the other, web streaming, all the same part of life. If everyone's relying on that piece of infrastructure that's sitting in a DC, or might be multiple redundancy solutions, but it's still in a DC around the world.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I want to take you back to your bucket list, because I didn't explore that enough for my liking. I want to know how many of the 1,000 DCs have you ticked off?
So I'm about 160 something. I haven't pulled the official list up in a couple of weeks. What I try and do is I like to aim for about 2 sites a week, or when I go traveling, it's 3 or 4 in a trip. I don't have a preference. Some people go, what do you consider a DC? And to me, if it's a standalone room, if it's a, I don't know the square feet on top of my head, but if it's 100 plus square meters, that's going to fit 20, 30 racks in it. So that, to me, that's a DC. That's an on-premise or a small site that ticks a box. They're still going to have redundancy in some capacity. They're going to have the ability where, they've got some sort of team that manage it. To me, that's a DC. Obviously, that's a very small scale, and I'm spending less time on them because they're actually migrating into more enterprise or wholesale facilities. And that's sort of, when you look at my list over time, it's sort of gone from computer rooms to now that's been put into a hall. And so I'm now spending more time, and there's people who've messaged me regularly going, hey, when you're here, come and see it. And I'm going to the US again in a couple of weeks, and there's 4 or 5 locked away within 2 weeks.
Nice.
And I'm very excited by that. And I'm hoping that some of the sites, they're going to be almost next door to each other. And you look at Virginia, you can walk within a 40-foot radius, and you're going to hit 5 or 6 sites straight away.
Yeah.
Lucky enough, I know a few people that can help me get into a tour, and they're more than happy to do so. And I think that's the exciting part. If you go back a decade or so, they weren't willing to show you, and there's still some people that go, can't do photos, you can't do this, they do that. And I'm all supportive for it because that's their IP, that's how they've built it, whether it be trademarked or just the custom they've got in there. But I still want to explore it. I'm more than happy to understand how they've done it, and that's sort of where my exciting thing is. Reaching 1,000 DCs is an ambitious goal in my eyes, and I don't know if there's anyone else has done that level. I mean, there could be, I know Joe Carver out of Google, and he's an absolute legend, been around for a long time. I'm sure he's seen a few DCs to, for tender processors to put their kit in there. I'm sure, Dean Nelson, when he was at eBay, or now he's at Cato Digital, he's on the same thing. He's deploying 1 million servers in 1,000 DCs. I'm pretty sure he'll see 1,000 DCs in his lifetime if he hasn't done so already. But there are people who go, this is for what we do as a job. And working in the industry I am and what I do, it now has become my job, which I'm excited to say that, I get the pleasure of traveling the world, which is great, seeing DCs, which is even more exciting, but actually then deploying equipment or talking to them more than just, hey, can I have a look around at your pretty racks with LEDs, or, checking out your chillers out the back, things like that. And that's the fun part.
I think accessibility is very important for the industry. Like you say, I think back in the day, before I was involved, it was all kind of behind closed doors. But now you're hearing a lot more work in local communities and the education of the impact and the benefits, but also just being a bit more, opening the doors a little bit. And there's a lot of initiatives out there that are doing that, aren't there?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the exciting parts of the industry we're in is there are regions. You look at Africa, for an example, it's an emerging market, and it has been for a couple of years now, but it's growing to a point where they go, we need, staff. We need to understand and learn more about it. New Zealand's a prime example. New Zealand is, already a pretty solid region economically, but it hasn't had a large amount of DC capacity in the 30, 40, 50 megawatts. There's Spark, there's 220 Queen, I think it's called. It's called the DC over there. They've got some great sites, ticks a box, but it's fit for purpose. But they haven't been a hyperscaler or a very large cloud provider, delivering a lot of compute for that region. In that, it's been bringing traverse back from Sydney or being sent up, to Guam and then to the US or wherever, which has been great. But now that market has grown, so now we're seeing those educational teams go in and go, right, this is how we've built it. This is how we look after it. This is what you need to understand it. And pulling people from electrical engineering backgrounds, mechanical backgrounds, from hospitals or other places like that, and talking to a few people who work with military, ex-defense people who've gone, I've done a tour in, somewhere. They've finished their position to support their country, and they've gone, right, what am I going to do next? And the DC area is quite a fit for purpose because it's regimented, it's designed in that way of this is how we do it. And I think that's something that's exciting for the industry, where we sort of go, we do have a shortage on X, Y, and Z. There are people out there who just need to change a shirt essentially, and you can come across. By all means, there is, and I think that's something that they've learnt is I still can't get an advanced diploma or degree, a master's in data centers. That doesn't exist, and that's very hard to do so. I mean, yes, there are, data center dynamics are doing stuff. As an example, I've seen there's a few others that have done that sort of testing where you go, here's a training, this is what a DC conventionally looks like, and this is what this things does. Juniper and Cisco do networking courses, and that helps as well. I think that's something that we've seen more and more of in time, where people are going, let's try and find some sort of coursework that helps, bring in the younger generation. And it's interesting to see, and I've had this conversation at PTC this year more so than previous years. There was a lot more people there, but it was a lot more people that can be colleagues of me and older who've got the 20 plus years experience. What's going to happen in 5 years when they decide to change, retire, and things like that? There's not as many young people coming through. And I explained to someone sort of going, there are enough, but they're not high enough up where they go, hey, come in Hawaii and have a chat with someone. It doesn't necessarily have an ROI that people can justify. And I think that's the sad part. And I know that the PTC group, Brian Moon and team are sort of going, hey, we'll invite, a person under 33, 32, whatever it is, you can come for free, as a way to try and promote that. Because that's it might be, I don't know what the tickets are on top of my head, but, there's an exercise there. Flights and accommodations are already one thing, and then to add a ticket on top. If there's any little bits and pieces they can do to reduce that cost to get them across so they can learn and grow and support, then I think that's a well worth exercise, because they are going to become the next up and comers, right?
Yeah, no, I think there's a number of different challenges across the industry, and I'm a recruiter by trade, by day, so this is probably the one I feel more passionate about, connected to as well in some way, because I'm closest to it. But I think people's challenges is the biggest challenge the industry will face in the next few years. Yes, there is power, but I think there are going to be challenges around power and resources. But I think the industry will experience the first wave of retirements, like you say, that it en masse that it has done really since it kind of started to any great scale. And I think the industry has also got a lot of competitor industries. And I think I've said on other episodes, like SpaceX and other STEM related electric vehicles, for example, that are just more tangible. And data centers are sexy, or they can be sexy. I know some people have said, well, actually, I don't think they really are, but I think the industry can definitely be sexy. I just don't know if it's really seen like that because you can't really see and feel it as much. I think the industry's got a lot of work to do on that, especially at the grassroots. Because, like you say, there are the people there. It's just, are they actually going to choose the industry? I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
I've used a hashtag before, DCs are sexy, and I'll still continue to use that. And I wouldn't mind getting a tattoo of that because I think that the industry is amazing. DCs are sexy in different ways. Obviously, I'm very, I guess I'm very much attached to them in a way that others aren't and don't understand. But that's just me being that weird person in the corner looking at them. But at the same point, they have a position of interest to others that they don't realize. And once you start to learn the complexities, it might get the engineering brains to be switched on. The sales teams of, you don't have to sell in a way that you can do others. If you can be a hyperscaler and you can have 3 or 4 customers and they're your big team, or you can be an enterprise person and sell to the masses. There's different verticals now in the industry which hasn't existed in time. And that sort of also is a bit of a breather. The market's growing enough where there can be more and more people coming into it. And as much as, there'll be fighting internally between, the industry of, hey, I'm going to poach it from one company to another. That's always going to exist. And that happens with every industry. I know insurance and banking and stuff, it's pretty bad. And it's just not as common, or we don't hear about it, as much because I'm not in that industry where, I'm in the DC space enough. There's always someone going somewhere, or, even myself, I've jumped between 2 different in particular companies that are very, very similar. So it's just the way of the nature of the beast. So what we're going to experience more and more of is, that occurring, but trying to bring new people on because, as I said, new regions are emerging. And we just can't keep just poaching people and keep going around. We have to bring on new talent and also the language barrier. French and Italians, don't necessarily want to talk to, myself in other ways because I don't live there. So you want to have that kind of demographic. Same as, people who hang out in Hong Kong, the Singaporeans, the absolute, great. Those 2 regions are perfect for DCs because of the way they're interconnected and what they deliver. But sometimes, the currency, I'm going to say $1 million Hong Kong dollars. I know the conversion rate because I spent enough time understanding it, but it doesn't mean that someone else does. So, there's a way in which you have to understand that market, understand that. I think that's a key piece to what we learn. And that's sort of what we're trying to do, is evolve in that space.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think loads of challenges, but I think if we address the challenges head on, talk about them more, and actually not just talk about them, but actually try really drive initiatives that really help. Because as you say, there's, my day job is littered with conversations with potential customers and customers who, they're looking at the next 12 months and the here and now. And you do, arguably, it's easier world if you start hiring people from competitors with the right experience. But I also feel that those that do hire teams from diverse backgrounds of industries, for sure, almost have a richer culture and a genuinely, better retention rate, for example. I really do see that.
Yeah, I sort of, when you look at, and obviously we've had a conversation previously before the podcast, we had a whole bunch of questions to go through. I think this sort of ties in with multiple other things is, how do we make the industry stand out to be the choice, and how do we make it become this, unique beast? And that's always going to be the challenge in every industry. Mining was like this, in Australia and parts of Africa, for the last couple of years, is how do you make mining appealing? You're sitting in a truck moving ore around. That's not very exciting, but you get paid handsomely, and that's what you do. And that was sort of the metric. And DCs aren't necessarily, you're not going to become a billionaire by becoming a network technician. We know that. But it leads right up to a point where you become an executive, and the business is expanding that much that we know that unless you own part of the company, you probably not going to be at that company for the next 50 years because the industry is evolving that much. And I do know guys that have been, around for 20 or 30 years in the same industry, but they haven't had the same job. And that's because the industry has evolved from what the product was when they first started, straight out of grad school, or, coming straight in from a different role. I think that's what we're seeing change in that regards. It is sexy and it makes it appealing.
That right there, I think, is for people aspiring to get into the industry, or maybe at the start of their journey, it's the route your career can go. I don't think you have to necessarily undertake the same discipline over the next 10, 15 years at all. It will evolve maybe into areas that you can't even see at the moment, which I think is a really, really cool thing. And you also get to travel. I saw you at PTC, Adam.
Yeah.
It was a couple of months ago now. How was the trip? And just give people an insight into how you find PTC, because it's a long way. It's a huge investment. There's a lot of people that want to go, can't necessarily go or have the time to go. Just bring that to life if you can, of what that trip's like.
It's funny. It's a long travel for Europeans. I appreciate and understand that. For me, it's only a 12 and a bit hour flight. It's quite convenient for me. It's actually, PTC is one of the most enjoyable flights I have. Time zone is good and bad. I lose a day, but gain a day. But that's it with everything with your travel. But yeah, for Europeans, it does hurt a little bit because of the long travel. But when I go to Capacity Europe and other places for other events, it affects me the same way. But PTC as a whole, in the last, I think it's my 4th or 5th year of going, it's definitely changed the dynamic in how PTC has become a pinnacle event. And there are, I guess, so much interaction you can get from walking through the Tropics Bar, or even just walking around in certain areas where you go, oh, how are you? And all of a sudden, there's a conversation to be done. And that's sort of how I bumped into you randomly, walking through there. Just a 5-minute, hey, how are you? Let's catch up soon. I think that's the return on investment as PTC can be measured differently. It's much like ITW, where there are key people that are going. And as I explained to someone early on at PTC, it's very hard to get a meeting with the CEO, and it's very hard to get multiple CEOs to catch up at the same point. And the flights and accommodation for me to come and see you, it's very, very challenging. If I know there's 4 or 5 people I need to talk to, or at least to catch up, sign an agreement, see how things are going, it's a prime place. And look, Hawaii is not a horrible place at that time of year anyway. So some people, such as yourself, get away with the cold, and I know there's other places in the US trying to get away with the cold. Down Singapore and Australia, it's still summer for us, so the weather's not too bad. But the joys of PTC, it becomes a connection point, and that's a relationship perspective. And my firm belief is relationships are key. For anyone to do a deal, whether it be sales and account management, they need to like you, and you need to like them. You need to believe in what you sell, or at least understand your product heavily, where they can ask some curly questions and you feel comfortable of saying no and not making a problem for yourself later, but definitely being excited for what you're doing. And that becomes back to the relationship. If you're comfortable in how you do all that, you become excited, you want to go to them, you want to chat, and you get things moving. And I think that's the exciting part for PTC, is there's so many key people. There's a large list of DC operators, designers, financiers, as well as, like yourself, the recruiting side of things that support the DC function, the carriers, whether it be subsea or terrestrial, that are there, even, the mechanical, electrical, the network as a service providers, the developers. There's a long list of industries that support the DC and telco realm go to PTC. Even talking to people who've been there for 10 or 15 years ago, it was very much a subsea telecommunications event. And it's changed heavily into the DC space, because telecoms is there, absolutely, but they need to reside in, some sort of cable landing system or some sort of DC or mixture of one or both. So it's come to that point. PTC, ITW are 2 key ones that people go to. I'm all a big supporter of Capacity Europe, big supporter of Kickstart. Those events where you sort of go, yeah, there's others. There's DCD, so Dyson Dynamics. There's a New York one coming up shortly. There's the guys from Yotta as well, doing one in Vegas towards the end of the year. Yeah, there's some events where you go, this makes sense. Then you've got the DC World and stuff like that, which is very much vendor. So it's, how I'm a DC operator, I want to talk to the Stultz, the Schneiders, the Eatons, the Caterpillars, and that's a good event for them. I think that's something that you need to appreciate and understand from a business perspective of, what are you trying to get out of it? Who do you want to see? And PTC is, very, very much more a customer and partnership component that's less DC operations, where others are very much, vendor focused in that regards. That's look, PTC, I can't get over the amount of events and the amount of conversations, and even to this day, what are we, end of February, and I'm still having conversations of, hey, we didn't catch up, sorry about that, and I'm at this event, and there's Metro Connect, and there's the capacity Middle East occurred a couple of weeks afterwards, and the guys are doing stuff all over the shop. So it's an event that you can sort of leverage for multiple months afterwards. It's not just a 5-minute conversation and then you're done and I'll see you next year. You can sort of really build your business from that event and really flow it of, this is what we need to do this year and we're going to sign next year. And I've been in a couple of meetings and actually have seen that, where we had a meeting, in early January a couple of years ago, and the deal got done, or we got to a point where we could actually transact in a way the following year. That's exciting because that's a full cycle. And I don't think that, in our industry, where a lot of fast paced and it's very fast moving, but sometimes the deals can't be done that quickly because the site isn't live, and about it at PTC, so the deal can't be done until August.
Yeah.
And I think that's the insight as well, is everyone is excited beginning of the year. They're excited to talk about what's going on.
Yeah, no, I agree. But in business, especially over the last 12 months, I guess, or 24 months, the way the economy is, money's hard to come by. People are tightening their belt, and it's an expensive trip. But what you said earlier, Adam, is so true. I know AI might change the dynamic of certain industries, and sales is one of those industries which gets, could be made redundant in some ways. But people, if you're going to do a deal, which is what you said, people need to buy into you, like you, connect with you, and I just don't think that's ever going to change, or not. Maybe not in my time. If you're doing a deal, you've got to build relationships, and you're absolutely right. We also are still, making connections, having business conversations with people. Have a short sales cycle than maybe data center professionals, but certainly still having conversations with people we met and connected with in 2023. That's so valuable for us as well. But you can't always expect instant returns either, which I think a lot of people may go there feeling that's what they're going to come back with, a ton of business, and it doesn't. We all know it doesn't work like that.
And we see it from the AI perspective that there are people and the companies I've worked for over the years have created portals and things like that, so you quickly order something and it'd be almost instantly provisioned. That does exist, and that's been around for quite a while. And AI obviously assists that, and it's the buzzword. I get that. Bitcoin was a buzzword a while ago, and there's many other words that we've used in the industry or supporting industries that have helped us. Cloud is another prime example. We're going to the cloud. It could just be a dedicated server and it's got a virtualized wrapper over the top and it's still the cloud. So we sort of look at it different ways, and I think that still resonates back to automation. AI components are great, but how do you have that component? You still need to have a relationship there, and you've got to work with. There's so many businesses out there, and the industry is can be very regionalized and be very applicable to those groups. Use India as an example. India is a massive market, and it's sort of only getting tapped now, and we're seeing that there are DC operators that are partnering with the localized groups or getting in there because there's enough people where you can make that sense to build in there. But there's a whole bunch of regulations that we don't know about. We don't know the tax brackets. We don't understand the staffing ways and how much the companies need to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like anyone going to any region, but having that support and having that relationship means you can put that AI product into that site without any problems. Again, it comes back to the whole point of what I want to see sites, what I want to, what I call DC sexy, because it creates an ecosystem and it creates that relationship, and therefore I get excited because every day is different. You're going to talk to someone, and I think that's the exciting part, is customers now have the accessibility with the network infrastructure to communicate with people around the world within milliseconds and access and put their information in multiple platforms and be comfortable that it's secure, it's safe, it's private, it's public, it's whatever they want it to be. There's metrics and services designed for it, or being created for it, that make it work. Just, again, connecting to PTC, ITW, those events, you learn about that too. And I think that's the other part as well, is you can be, if you're a DC operator you built a site in, outside of Texas, you can be running that site for 30 years and not know anything more, and vendors come and talk to you. You can go to one event and your mind will be blown because there is some cool idea that, gets you 50 customers, or shaves, staffing, managing paper to managing it via an iPad or a tablet of sorts. I think that's what we're all trying to help each other. And that's the funny part of the industry as well, is as much as we compete with each other, we're also friends with each other as well. And that's a very interesting game, because we just want to deliver results, and we want everyone, there's enough customers there that we might lose a tender or something like that, but we're going to pick it up somewhere else, because there's so much growth. And we're lucky enough that industries have to retain, data. That retention component is becoming greater and greater. So, paperwork, you used to put it in a filing cabinet. Now we take 5 photos and we keep all 5 photos, and we keep it for 7 years because that's what we have to do. And all of a sudden, iPhones and Samsungs and all the other devices out there that hold information, it's tripled, quadrupled, in the last couple of years, let alone what the storage is like. And I think that's a key piece that just makes the exciting world that we live in.
It does. It certainly does. So just to give the listeners a little bit of insight into the day job, Adam, if you can, what's in store for the next 12 months with yourself and Megaport? What's happening?
The biggest driver, and I've seen it with a few of the players in our space, is expansion. And it's much like the DC operators as well. We're all trying to expand because there's demand. And we're seeing the demand from the end customers. We're seeing demand from the hyperscalers, wanting to get into new regions, or going, we've run out of capacity, or we've found a way in which we have to shut something down and grow something. And DCs are getting old too. I think this is what comes into play of, we've got to appreciate there are some players out there who have bought DCs or been in the industry for 20 or 30 years and have assets that are that old, and keeping them, stretching them out, and they're still running out of capacity. So the biggest drive for us, working in my day job, is how do we expand and work and grow into new markets, new regions, deliver, a quality product that has automation, security, and the functionality what people want. We know that everything is now readily accessible, readily available. We know that people will look at, and the retention ratio on websites has changed dramatically. It used to be a 5-year customer because you had to build a website, and it had to be housed with a dedicated server, and you pay for a contract. We're seeing now that people go, hey, I want to move between this bucket and that bucket, and I want to do it for all weekend for 48 hours, and I need to go. Others go, hey, we're going to do it differently. We want redundancy because of the way our operation works. That comes into the business case these days. We're seeing of how to expand and things like that. And we're all the same. All the carriers, all the telcos are putting more cables in the world, whether it be subsea or terrestrial, or even you look at the satellite componentry and stuff like that. It's all about growth and how do we create a product that helps the end users. And I think that's what I'm seeing is it's the same, and I'm there to support it. And so really it's getting into more DCs, which is, again, is exciting because I get to more tour more of them, and really have that fun part of, what do you have, Mr. DC, and do you have many? Do you have, something different? What do you do? And that's why I'm excited to keep doing it.
Sounds good. Sounds like a busy year. 102 flights, I think you mentioned last year. How many on the cards this year?
I hope it's less. And it's one of those things of flights are, people go, oh, you must love it. And the answer is, in reality, I don't necessarily love it that much. It does wear yourself out, and some days you're really over it. It's more so what's the other end, and that's the journey, and that's something that we go back to the relationship. I'm excited to jump on a plane to meet a DC operator, meet someone, and catch up with them. It's great that you see them at events, but you don't get enough time with them at those events. So how do you ensure that the relationship you have with them, the partnership you have with them, the commercial function, the customer accessibility that they want to work with you on is sorted out? And there's no better thing than actually seeing it face to face. And look, yes, having a dinner with them or a lunch with them, or them showing you around their region, showing them what they're famous for. I've had a lot of famous ribs and burgers and all kinds of stuff throughout the world where, you know, it is just meat, but it's spiced differently or it's cooked differently. And, you know, I've had some really crazy meals in Singapore and Hong Kong. I've done some wild stuff in Barcelona. It's fun. And I think that's the exciting part of what I do and why I like to travel. And I wouldn't change that. I think that's the outcome. And people think I'm crazy. And I know that there's people going, I'd love to do your job. And I say, come along for a trip. And they'd go, what's your itinerary look like? And they go, no, I'm okay.
No,
So I try and pump in as much as I possibly can into a day, and understand there are only, you know, that's my biggest limitation. There are only 24 hours in a day, and I do need to eat, and I do need to sleep, because otherwise the day afterwards horrible. So, and living in Australia, it's one of the greatest countries in the world, and I will retire here. Whether I want to live somewhere else, and, you know, as an interim, has been on the cards. But, you know, by living in Australia, there's always going to be a long flight, and, you know, unlike you, well, fortunately for you, Dell, is living in Europe, it's a couple of hours. You can get to multiple different countries, and, you know, currency is different, language is different, food's different. You know, there's so many different areas where, you know, what you travel in 6 hours, I can just get to the other side of my continent. And that's, you know, it's the same country, the same currency, the same people in that regards. I think that's, you know, mind-boggling for some. But for me, I just want to explore what the world's got to offer. It's a beautiful, you know, beautiful place, you know, Swiss Alps, Italy, you know, seeing just what people are proud to call home for them.
Yeah, it definitely is an industry that can take you to all corners of the earth, which is, again, for a lot of people out there, is a big attraction piece. I think that the variety and the exposure you can get through the industry is, through, as you've described, is mega. So that sounds good. I've got a couple of questions before we wrap up.
Sure.
I haven't prepared you for these, but in terms of the best data center you visited, can you reveal that, you know, can you not?
You look, there are some DCs that are beyond comprehension just because of the way they've built them in certain locations. I do have to say, within that, I did post about it on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, was Supernat Switch out of Vegas. Rob Roy, look, I'd love to meet him. He's an absolute legend in my eyes. And there are a few people, Chris Sharp from Digital Realty, Bevan Slattery out of Australia, you know, some people that I've met along the way where I go, you know, you are rock stars in my eyes. And they've brought something different to the industry that's really helped me as a person love it even more. And what Rob has done out of Switch, it's phenomenal. His customer base, the way that they've put attention to detail on all their bits and pieces, it's second to none. And it's shown when Mark Gansey out of Digital Bridge said we're going to acquire the sites and the portfolio for whatever that public announcement was for the billions of dollars they did. You know, it's shown that if you build quality and have a great product, you know, it can be worth something. And I think that's sort of, as a person that will shout from the rooftops how cool DCs are, you know, Switch is definitely one that you go, wow, this is out of this world.
Yeah, that's good. And then the last question: if you hadn't have encountered that guy at your gaming event that you put on, what would you be doing now?
When I first, you know, was during school, I had and I still am a big lover of planes and things like that. And PTC was great because I was hanging out with Brian out of Coreside. We were hanging out in Rainbow Town. We just saw jets flying around. I think we spent more time chatting about jets and that kind of stuff than talking, but about DCs. But I think that's sort of where a side passion for mine is, you know, I'd love to get a little bit of time to fly planes, and I've had the ability to be in quite a few different jets while traveling around the world. Then, yeah, and I thought about being a naval aviator is probably something that I'd, you know, travel and be in the Navy, go on ships, which, you know, I'm a water kid, and so I enjoy that as a hobby to get out of DCs altogether. But if I put the mixture of flying on a ship, that'd be pretty cool. But look, it's still in the cards, right? Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. I'm a bit of a plane geek as well. So what's your favorite commercial? What's your favorite commercial plane? Going off piece there, but
look, I'm I'm a fan of the Concorde. I would have loved to be able to fly on the Concorde when I flew into Paris. I think it was last year, or maybe the year before, and seeing the Concorde right there as you drive in and out of the airport. That was phenomenal. Lego, I'm a big Lego nut, and I just released the Concorde, so I had to buy two there to build one, keep one, and I think that's sort of, again, as we evolve, as when you get out of your youth and you go, okay, I'm going to get my teeth stuck into a profession, you find other hobbies that keep you amused, and I guess that's what you try and strive for. And if you get paid to do what you do, and you love what you do, and you get some cash to buy to play with a hobby or do something else, that's really your life. Is can't get any better. And kids are great, love them, support them. Got some of my own, but it's they grow up too, right? And you want them to be their own. I think that's sort of why we do what we do. And that's also one of the reasons, and I see it in one of the questions, and I'll touch on it very briefly, is why I post what I do on LinkedIn. It's all me. It's what you see is what you get. I don't drink coffee, I drink chalky milk, and that's just how I am. I don't drink alcohol either, but it's still, I've caught up with a lot of people who will shout me a chocolate milkshake, and I appreciate the people out there that do that. That's just who I am, and I think that's a part of what I love doing, is connecting with people and building that portfolio of working with absolute rock stars and the smartest people in in the industry, because you're going to evolve yourself and learn something new. And I think that's what you want to do, is teach your kids that it's all about courtesy and honesty and respect. And I think that's what you do in this industry. If you do it well, you can go anywhere.
Yeah, I think on that very strong message and powerful message, we'll end that there, Adam. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. If you're listening to this and you don't follow Adam on LinkedIn, which you probably already do, but if you didn't, definitely follow Adam. He puts out, as he said, authentic content, which is informative, it's fun, and it's real. And I think the industry needs loads more of that. So Adam, thank you very much for joining us on the Data Center Exchange. It's late there, so have a good sleep as well.
No, I appreciate that, Del, and thanks for the listeners. I mean, I appreciate you, Del, for doing this. There are a few guys that are trying to promote the DCs, and I'm glad that you're one of them, and it helps us. So I appreciate your help and what you do.
No problem. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Cheers.